The house was quiet that morning. I was in the kitchen, boiling water for tea, just the way I liked it. 2 bags, 1 squeeze of lemon, a little honey. The sunlight through the shutters didn't feel intrusive for once. I remember thinking, maybe today would be uneventful. That thought barely had time to breathe. Zentha walked in like she owned the air around her. That smile she always wore. It wasn't warm, not really. It was polished, weaponized courtesy. She paused by the doorway, holding her phone like she'd just finished a boardroom call. "We're having a holiday gathering," she said breezily. "The whole family, 35 of them. They'll be here in 3 weeks." I blinked. 35? Yes, give or take. It'll be just lovely. Her tone made it sound like she'd just ordered fresh flowers. There was no question in her voice, no space for an opinion. It was a proclamation, the kind that didn't need a response. She never asked me. I stood there, mug in hand, while the water finished boiling behind me. Steam curled into the air, but I stayed still. No nod, no expression, just still. I think that's when I first realized what I'd known for years. I wasn't really part of this home. Later that afternoon, she came into the kitchen again, talking through a list she'd made on her phone. "Aunt Selma is allergic to shellfish. You'll have to adjust the appetizer tray. Oh, and Cousin Hal needs low sodium. Be mindful of that. Dessert needs to be nut-free, obviously. You'll figure it out." I smiled, tight-lipped, and nodded, like some damn concierge. I didn't say anything. I never do. But inside, my chest was burning. Not rage, not yet, just heat. Like when you stand too close to the oven and forget it's on. She kept going. Seating charts, drink preferences, guest arrival timing. Not once did she ask what I thought. Not once did she ask if I wanted this. When I tried to speak just once, she waved me off like I was offering her a second napkin. "Oh, you're so good at this, dear. I'm just trusting your gift." Gift? I wanted to ask her when I had become the hired help. I wanted to ask when exactly I got stripped of being a husband, a partner, a son-in-law, and became whatever this was. But I didn't, because I already knew the answer. That evening, I walked past the dining room and noticed the guest list printed out on the table. Fancy paper, names alphabetized. I skimmed the list, half expecting to find myself there. I wasn't. There was, however, a section labeled Support. Just beneath the caterer's assistant, someone had typed, House Assistant. One of the younger cousins, barely 20, walked by, pointed at the list, and chuckled. "Oh, is that you?" he asked, then looked startled by his own joke. He quickly walked off. I didn't say anything, didn't need to. The damage was done. I went back to the kitchen and stared out the window. The same one I had cleaned every Friday for the past 5 years. The same window I used to sit near with Marcus, watching the neighborhood dogs trot by after dinner. Now, I didn't see dogs. I saw my reflection, and I barely recognized the man staring back. I sat down at the table and folded my hands. Why hadn't I said anything? Why did I let this happen? Fear. Fear of being homeless, of being forgotten, of becoming a footnote in the only place Marcus and I ever called home. And guilt, survivor's guilt, is a strange, sticky thing. You begin to believe that silence is the least you can offer in exchange for outliving the person who mattered most. Marcus once told me, on one of his lucid days near the end, sometimes you survive by being invisible, but don't forget, invisible things still hold the house up. I hadn't forgotten. I just didn't know how long I could keep holding it up. So, I made a decision. I wouldn't argue, I wouldn't shout or beg, I'd wait, observe, absorb, and when the time was right, I'd vanish in a way they'd feel, because if I had become invisible, then they needed to understand what gone truly meant. Until then, I smiled and said what they wanted to hear. "Perfect, I'll be here." The words felt like swallowing a nail. 2 days later, Zentha was showing a guest some holiday decorations in the dining room. She pulled out a set of tablecloths, embroidered, off-white with subtle blue stitching, each corner finished by hand. She smiled, fake as ever, and said, "My former daughter-in-law ordered these online years ago. They're just beautiful." I stood in the doorway and felt my hands curl into fists. Not rage, not shock, just silence. I had sewn every one of those tablecloths, one each night for a week when Marcus was too sick to sleep and I needed something to keep from falling apart. And now, like everything else, the credit had been reassigned. Just like that. But I didn't say anything. Because sometimes silence is an agreement. Sometimes it's the only thing left when they refuse to hear you speak. It was supposed to be a regular Tuesday. I'd gone out early to pick up groceries, nothing major, just a few things to hold us until the big shopping for the party. As I pulled into the driveway, bags rustling in the back seat, I remember thinking how strangely calm the street looked. Too calm. I tried the key like I always did. Routine, muscle memory. It didn't turn. I pulled it out, tried again. Still nothing. The deadbolt didn't budge. I stood there for a second, the plastic bags tightening around my fingers. Then I knocked. 3 short, polite taps. Zentha opened the door as if she'd been expecting me. "Oh," she said, light as ever. "We had the locks changed. Torvin needed extra security for the baby. You understand?" I didn't say a word, just nodded once and walked in like nothing had happened. But something had. It was small, just a lock. But it screamed. That afternoon, I noticed I hadn't gotten a single message from the family chat. I'd checked twice. No alerts, no updates. So, during cleanup in the kitchen, I asked Ethan, one of the younger cousins, barely old enough to rent a car, "Hey, did the group chat move to a new thread?" He hesitated, looked down at his phone. I think Aunt Zentha said it would be easier to streamline communication. Just direct messages now, I guess. Streamline. What a word. Makes exclusion sound efficient. That night, I sat in the corner of the living room, folding towels, pretending not to care. But in my mind, I was tallying up every inch I'd lost. First my title, then the conversations, now the key and the thread that connected us all. They didn't remove me with an announcement. They phased me out, like background music when the main event starts. At dinner, I brought it up. Or tried to. I waited until everyone was mid-meal, conversations swirling around decor, the upcoming party, who would sleep where. I cleared my throat. I noticed the key didn't work earlier. "I guess the locks were changed?" Zentha didn't look up. She was slicing her roast chicken like it was a delicate task. Yes, just a precaution," she said. "You know, shared spaces, shared security." "Shared," I echoed. But it didn't feel shared. It felt claimed. "I just thought I'd be told," I added softly. She smiled, still not looking up. "Well, it's still your home, Kaelson. Don't be so sensitive." I smiled back, though I could feel my teeth grinding. Passive control, that's what she mastered. No screaming, no slamming doors, just polite shoves disguised as gestures of care. Later that night, when the house quieted and everyone retreated to their rooms, I walked through the halls like a stranger. The bookshelf I built 3 summers ago still held the novels Marcus loved. The same light fixture we argued over in Home Depot hung above the dining table. I remembered installing it, sweating through a July afternoon. Now, I couldn't unlock the front door. I didn't even know what the group was planning, and my name wasn't on any list. But Torvin, barely related, barely helpful, walked around with a spare key like he was inheriting the damn house. That's when the thought hit me. They weren't protecting the house. They were preparing to replace me. I sat alone in the kitchen after everyone went to bed. The fridge hummed softly. The walls felt thinner than usual. I opened a drawer and found a printout of the meal schedule for the party week, color-coded, labeled. Not a single task had my name. I flipped through the past few months in my head. First, they stopped asking me to weigh in on decorations. Then I wasn't included in discussions about guest rooms. I didn't even get asked about the music playlist, something Marcus and I always curated together. One by one, I had disappeared from every part of this house that once needed me. Now, the lock was proof. I wasn't thrown out. I'd been erased. Back in the kitchen, I opened my old notebook, the one Marcus gave me when we first moved in. Taped inside the front cover was a note he wrote when he was sick, but still thinking clear. Never let silence define your place in this world. I stared at those words for a long time. Then I picked up a pen, not to write a farewell, but to start planning. Not out of spite, not even anger. Clarity. If they wanted me invisible, fine, but I'd make sure they remembered what happened when the ghost stopped doing the dishes. The handmade tablecloth lay folded next to me, waiting to be pressed. I ran my hand along the edge. I remembered every stitch, every late night, every moment I put into this house when no one was watching. Let them have their party, I said aloud. But let them host it without the one who held it together. I was looking for a shirt, just a navy button-up I like to wear when running errands, not even one of my best. I checked the usual drawer, nothing. Checked the closet, half empty. That stopped me. I opened the door wider and took in the room. There was a space, a gap in the air where my clothes used to live. Some hangers were still swinging slightly, like they'd been moved not long ago. I stepped into the hallway and saw them. 3 boxes, stacked neatly, labeled in black marker. Temporary belongings, guest storage. The top box had my name, not fully, just K, faded. There wasn't a single dent in the cardboard, not one tear in the tape. Clean work. Planned, executed. I didn't touch them. I just stood there, looking at the handwriting like it had personally slapped me. That label wasn't just about stuff, it was a statement. One sentence written in Sharpie, "You're not part of this house anymore." I found Zentha in the dining room, arranging silverware into little decorative fans. I asked straight, "Did you move my clothes?" She didn't flinch. "We needed room for the baby. Torvin's wife is coming early, and they need the closet." She looked up, that warm, tight smile on her face. "You understand, don't you?" She didn't say it like a question. Her voice was soft, even friendly, but the blade sat behind her words. I nodded, like I always did. And that made it worse. She wasn't kicking me out. She was shrinking the space I stood on, 1 inch at a time. I wanted to say, "This used to be my husband's room." I wanted to say, "You don't get to box up grief and call it redecorating." But instead, I just stood there, watching her fold napkins like she was leading a damn wedding banquet. I went back to the room. If I could even call it mine anymore. It didn't smell like me. It didn't look like Marcus. The walls felt colder, like they'd been washed of everything we ever built together. The picture frame I kept near the bed, gone. The box of his books I used to keep in the corner, now tucked in the hallway outside. They'd turned a life into storage, and I had let them. I sat down in front of one of the boxes, opened it slowly. Inside, just clothes, folded, too perfect. I dug a little deeper, hoping... What? I don't know. That's when I found it. Folded in with a sweater. A scrap of paper, torn from a notebook. "Kate, don't ever let them repurpose your love." No name, no date. But I recognized the handwriting. Marcus. That piece of paper felt heavier than everything else combined. Late that afternoon, I passed by the study on my way to the laundry. I wasn't eavesdropping, just wrong place, wrong time. Zentha was on the phone, calm, clipped, legal. Update the will. Remove Kaelson's name from the transitional clause. Yes, I want it finalized before the end of the week. I stopped walking. She didn't hear me. She didn't even pause. It wasn't anger that hit me. It was cold. Legal language, the kind that erases people without raising a voice. One clause, one signature, and just like that, I'd be nobody in the house I once helped run. I didn't say a word, just turned and walked away. Slowly. The next morning, I called Savannah. She used to work with Marcus back when he handled estate cases. She picked up on the second ring. "I need help," I said. She listened. I told her about the boxes, the locks, the group chat, the dinner table, and now, the will. She paused, then said, "I might be able to do something, but you'll need proof." That woke something in me. For the first time in weeks, I felt alert, not angry, focused. I started thinking about receipts, screenshots, emails, photos. I didn't want revenge. I wanted records. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there, arms behind my head, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow. "You don't throw a storm at them," I whispered into the dark. "You let it build. Let them walk right into it." I left the box in the hallway, Didn't push it aside, didn't hide it. Let them see it. Let it sit there like a monument. A quiet declaration. I saw what you did, and I haven't gone anywhere. Not yet. The house didn't look like home anymore. I walked through the living room that morning, and nothing was where it used to be. The rug was different, floral, too loud. The curtains were new, but not better. The tablecloth was mine, though. My stitches were in every corner. They just didn't know that. Zentha stood in front of the fireplace, smiling into a phone camera while Darva narrated the live stream. And here we are, folks. Final touches before the big gathering. Look at this elegance. Aunt Zentha, your vision is flawless. Flawless. They laughed together, right in front of the wall I'd painted with Marcus. During one of his last good weeks, I watched them perform like actors on a set I had built from grief and maintenance. And still, I said nothing. Darva kept filming. The stream moved from room to room, her voice chipper. "This is where the magic will happen," she said, opening the back doors toward the patio. I stepped into the frame, nodded politely. Just enough to acknowledge, not interrupt. She lowered the phone and hissed, "Let's keep the focus clean, okay?" Then shifted the camera angle, cutting me out like I'd never stood there. Later that night, I sat on the edge of my bed, watching the playback from my phone. Her voice echoed through the speakers, full of charm and lie. "This house is just filled with love." I wanted to throw the phone across the room. You know who washed vomit off the baseboards when Marcus couldn't hold food down? You know who fixed the sink when no one else noticed it was leaking? You know who ran this home when Zentha only showed up for Christmas photos? Me, and I was nowhere in that stream. The next day, they did a practice toast. "To Aunt Zentha," Darva said, raising a glass, "the one who's always kept this family grounded." People clapped, cameras clicked. I didn't move. No mention of Marcus, no mention of who made it possible for him to live in peace those final years. No mention of me, and maybe that's what hurt most. Not that they'd forgotten, that they remembered, but chose someone else to applaud. I slipped away before dessert and found myself digging through a forgotten bin in the hall closet. Inside, an old photo album, the one I used to keep in our bedroom. Except, it had changed. All the photos of me, gone. New pictures were labeled Zentha's Restoration Project. There was a side-by-side of the kitchen. The before showed clutter, poor lighting. The after was pristine, light fixtures I'd installed, cabinets I'd painted. They used my work to build her legend. I felt like I was watching my life on mute. Later, while cleaning the hallway, a little cousin pointed at a wall hanging I'd embroidered by hand the winter Marcus couldn't walk. "Did Aunt Zentha get that off Etsy? It's so cool!" Zentha was standing right there. She smiled, didn't correct him, and neither did I. But something shifted. I folded my apron and left it on the counter. Didn't say anything, didn't make a show, just walked out and closed the door behind me. Back in my room, I opened my notebook. First page, clean sheet. "You won't find me in the next chapter." That was all I wrote. Then I picked up the phone and called Savannah. "What's the minimum legal notice I need to vacate before Christmas?" I asked. She answered, quick, "None, unless there's a written lease." That was the first time I smiled in weeks. I didn't leave that night, but I'd already started packing in my mind. They'd been writing me out for years. All I was doing now was making it official. The morning started with linens. I was folding them in the dining room, making stacks to go into the sideboard drawers. The cotton was stiff from sun-drying. Zentha insisted on that. Said it smelled more like home, though it hadn't smelled like my home in a long time. A little voice came from behind me. "Are you the housekeeper?" I turned. One of the cousin's kids, maybe 6, maybe 7, stood there holding a juice box, looking at me like I was part of the furniture. "You're really good at making things look pretty," she added. I didn't respond. Not right away. I looked at her face, clean, innocent, sincere. She meant no harm. That's the part that cut the deepest. Zentha was nearby, fiddling with centerpiece arrangements. She heard it. Didn't correct the child. Didn't even glance my way. I forced a smile, a small one. The kind you give when you've already lost count of how many times you've swallowed your pride. And then I walked out. didn't say a word. But my chest, it pulsed, not in anger, in confirmation. That evening, I sat on the back porch. The air was cooler than it had been all week, but my hands were still warm. Not from the weather, from memory. Marcus once told me, during one of his clearer days, if they can't see you now, they won't see you when you're gone, so make them remember the shape of your absence. I hadn't thought about that line in years, but tonight it landed differently. It didn't feel like advice. It felt like a roadmap. All this time I'd told myself I was preserving peace. Maybe I was just making my own disappearance easier to justify. That night, as I was heading back to my room, I saw something on the floor outside my door. Folded, small, cream-colored. A note, no name, no markings. Just one sentence, in print. She plans to hand the house over during the party. Be gone before it's done. My fingers trembled. Not from fear, from clarity. This wasn't neglect. It was intent. They weren't just pushing me out of the way. They were planning a clean sweep. Someone had noticed. Someone who wasn't trying to gain anything. It hit me harder than any fake smile or empty toast ever had. For the first time in weeks, I felt like someone had chosen me, even anonymously. That note did more for my sense of family than every family dinner combined. I didn't tell anyone, not Savannah, not even write about it in my journal. I just began. I moved a few personal things out of my room, nothing dramatic. Just enough that if they checked, they'd notice something was missing. I gathered every document I had, medical records, Marcus's letters, utility bills with my name on them. Opened a second bank account. Didn't rush, didn't panic. I'd seen enough storms to know that power doesn't come from yelling. It comes from showing up prepared when the thunder finally rolls. I placed the envelope back on my nightstand, fully visible. Let them see it. Let them guess who wrote it. Let them stew in uncertainty. Dinner that night was noisy, too noisy. Manufactured joy. Zentha poured wine like she was officiating a wedding. People laughed too hard at small talk. Then she said it. The kitchen's going to be so busy next week, she mused, swirling her glass. Hope our little helper is ready. Laughter. It echoed. I took a sip of my wine. Let it sit. Then I smiled. Hope the host is ready to cook for 35 without me. The room stopped, just like that. Forks hovered mid-air, glasses froze an inch from lips. Zentha laughed, a shade too loud. You're full of jokes tonight. But her eyes? They flickered, like she wasn't sure if I meant it. Good. Let her wonder. That was the line. No shouting. No accusations. Just a line drawn, clear, clean, and final. Back in my room later, I opened my journal. They've mistaken my restraint for loyalty, I wrote. They're about to find out it was calculation. I boxed up 2 more items, left the rest where it was. Each action now had weight, meaning this wasn't retreat, it was restructure. I didn't need to set the house on fire. I just had to stop holding the beams in place. I was up before the sun, packed 1 small bag, zipped it quietly, no suitcases, no dramatics, just what I needed, just what I owned. Walked the house slow. Each room felt different now, emptier, colder, not because I was leaving it, but because I had already been removed from it long before. In the kitchen, I left the note right where she'd see it. I won't be home for the celebration. Best of luck. Short, clean, no accusations. Locked my door from the inside, stepped out the back. I didn't look back, didn't close the door hard, didn't even pause. It wasn't abandonment. It was punctuation. Later that morning, after the coffee had gone cold on the counter, Zentha found it. Darva was the first to see her face change. He's just being dramatic, she said, brushing a crumb off her blouse. He'll be back. But by lunch, something had shifted. They were setting up centerpieces and couldn't find the labels. The playlist had glitches. The oven settings weren't saved. It wasn't panic yet, but it was unraveling. No one said it out loud, but the help had left, and none of them knew what the hell to do without it. By afternoon, relatives had started arriving early. Darva, phone in hand, resumed her live streaming like nothing had happened. I watched from my hotel room, 1 town over. Ocean breeze through cracked windows. The kind of quiet that didn't ask me for anything. She was filming the dining room setup when a voice chimed in on the stream. "This layout is beautiful, Zentha. Did you do all this yourself?" Zentha didn't flinch. "Of course," she said, hand resting on a floral napkin I had stitched myself 3 winters ago. Darva panned the camera over the tablecloth. My tablecloth, my hands, my stitching, my late-night work. And then, the comments. "Wait, I've seen this on Kaleson's old blog. Didn't he design that setup last Christmas?" Screenshots started dropping into the chat, images of my designs, my labels, my handwriting. The internet didn't yell, it just remembered receipts. By sundown, guests poured in. The music was off by a beat. The lights flickered too long. The food was lukewarm, the drinks watered down. Zentha walked through the crowd smiling, but her eyes were sharp, watching every misstep. Someone asked, "Didn't Kaleson usually handle the catering?" Another added, "I thought he used to run the whole holiday thing." Zentha waved it off. "He's on a little getaway, needed space." But the cracks were there. Visible. Tangible. During the toast, Darva stood up, glass in hand, camera ready. "To Aunt Zentha," she said, "the woman who carried this entire event alone." Applause. Soft, polite. Then, from the back corner, a voice. Old. Firm. "Didn't Kaleson used to run this house?" It was Elber, Marcus's old friend. He stood, arms crossed, expression unreadable. The applause died. You could feel it, the air stiffen. No one answered. No one needed to. Because the question wasn't really a question, it was a memory, spoken out loud. After that, things shifted. Not dramatically, but noticeably. People glanced more. Whispers filled the corners. Zentha's smile didn't quite hold. That night in my hotel room, I watched the rest of the stream in silence. My tablecloth, my glassware, my absence. And I smiled, not because I had left, but because they finally felt what I had held together. By the time the sun rose, the house was already cracking. They had no idea where the catering forms were. The groceries? Half the list hadn't even been picked up. The oven hadn't been preheated, and the drinks weren't chilled. I wasn't there. And for the first time, it showed. People ran around in every direction, Zentha snapping orders like she was holding it all together, but you could see it in her eyes. The pace was off. Nothing flowed. There were no backups, no preset trays, no reminder lists. The air was tight. Someone muttered from the hallway, "Didn't Kaleson usually—" Then stopped. Of course I did. The fridge still had my handwriting on it, taped in the corner. A list, labeled, dated. Party prep completed through Thursday. Beyond that, good luck. Someone, probably one of the cousins, snapped a photo and posted it online. By noon, it had spread. Local Facebook groups were sharing it. Then Twitter, Instagram. I don't know who started the hashtag, but it caught on fast. Shared the quiet exit. Some folks called it petty. Others called it poetic. Strangers debated me like I was a headline. Why would someone leave a note like that unless they'd been treated like help? Screenshots from past years surfaced. Pictures of table setups I'd created. Stories from guests who remembered how smoothly the last 5 parties had gone, back when I ran them. And now, this mess was what they had. Darva kept live streaming, like the show had to go on, no matter what it looked like behind the camera. But the cracks weren't just in the prep anymore. They were in the guests. Elber showed up around 2, Marcus's old friend. Drove in from Augusta. He stepped through the door, took one look around, and said, loudly, "Where's Kaleson? This place never looked like this when he was around." Silence. Actual silence. Zentha, standing by the bar, forced a smile. He needed time away. Elber didn't buy it. That's what people say when they push someone out and don't want to own it. A few people nodded. No one clapped. It was small, but it was enough. Then came the questions. Why aren't there printed place cards this year? Didn't Kaleson usually manage the seating? Who planned this menu? The rhythm was off. The appetizers were bland. The drinks were too strong or too weak. Even a teenage niece, while rearranging napkins, whispered, "He used to do all of this." Zentha heard it. I know she did. Her smile held, but her eyes stung. Around 5, Darva checked her phone mid-toast and gasped. I didn't know what she saw right away, but I found out later. Her post from 2 days earlier, where she credited Zentha with all the design work, had been debunked. Comments flooded in with screenshots from my Pinterest boards, my archived blog, my old social posts, my handwriting, my designs, my planning. Darva went straight to Zentha, whispering fast. "You told me this was all yours." Zentha's voice sharpened, barely above a hiss. "And you told me you'd keep things quiet." Someone overheard it. Someone recorded it. And that clip went everywhere. By the end of the night, no one cared about the party. They cared about the one who wasn't there. Guests started leaving early. Some left without saying goodbye. Online, the commentary boiled. I watched it all from my hotel room, drink in hand. Hashtags grew. Comments piled up. The story had changed, not because I fought, because I left. Zentha sat alone at the end of it, probably refreshing her feed like it could save her, but the internet had already decided. "It's not about who throws the party," one comment said. "It's about who built the house." She read it, and finally realized. The party wasn't her triumph. It was her unraveling. The house had finally quieted, but Zentha hadn't. She was up long after the last guest left, curled on the couch with her phone lighting her face, scrolling through comments she couldn't control. Her hair was still done, her makeup fading under the weight of public humiliation. News moved fast in a town like ours, especially when the house that once hosted picture-perfect holidays became the backdrop of a social media fallout. Screenshots, blog archives, side-by-side comparisons, receipts, as the internet calls them. While she was scrolling, I was still. At a hotel not too far from the neighborhood I no longer claimed, I laid in bed. Not restless, not bitter, just ready. I texted Sivana one word. Ready. Her reply came before I even put the phone down. "Tomorrow morning, I'll drive." We didn't need fireworks, we needed paperwork. By 9 a.m., we were standing on the porch. I had dressed like any other Tuesday, slacks, button-up, no flair. Sivana held a folder thick enough to end a story. I held nothing. Zentha opened the door. The smile didn't even reach her cheeks this time. "Oh," she said. "Didn't expect—" "We're not here to argue," I said, calm. "Just to clarify a few things." Sivana stepped forward, handed her the first document. Her hand trembled before she even opened it. "A recorded will," Sivana said plainly. "Signed by your son, grants Kaelson legal occupancy rights to this property for the duration of his choosing." Zentha's eyes darted between us, then the paper. "He never filed this," she snapped. "He didn't need to," Sivana replied. "This is enforceable under Georgia law. Witnessed, notarized." Zentha opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. I let the silence settle. She sat down on the edge of the entryway bench, staring at the letter like it had come from the grave. Then came the pivot. "If you were so hurt," she said quietly, "why didn't you ever say anything?" I stayed standing. Because when you're hurting, sometimes silence feels like the safest thing. But when you're erased, silence turns to something else. She looked up. "So this is revenge?" "No," I said. "This is correction." She stood, sharper now. "You let us believe everything was fine." "No," I replied. "You believed what was convenient." She flinched. It was the only time I saw her drop the performance, even for a second. I opened the folder and placed several printed pages on the table. Blog posts, photos, timelines, proof. And then, at the very bottom, the letter. I had found it stuffed in a book Marcus left me. Not meant for anyone's eyes but mine. But now, it served a greater truth. She read it aloud under her breath. "If anything ever happens to me, make sure Kaelson never gets erased." The words came from her son. Her hands shook slightly. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat there, like the weight of everything she'd built had been made of sand, and the tide had finally come in. Savannah's voice cut the silence. Would you prefer to handle this privately or formally? Zentha hesitated. For the first time in years, I watched her not know what to do. She looked around the room like it might hand her a script. None came. I stepped forward, not to intimidate, but to end it. I don't want to fight. I don't want the house. I just want space. And I want the truth to stay where it belongs. That's all I needed. Not control. Just correction. She nodded. Barely. It wasn't a victory. But it was an end. As we left, walking back toward the car, she whispered, not to me, but to the air. This house will never feel the same. I turned at the door. That's the point, I said. It shouldn't. No doors slammed. No voices raised. But this time, I wasn't the one holding the silence together. I came back for one thing, the last box. The one they left untouched in the hallway, stacked beneath the guest pillows like it belonged there. It didn't. The house was quiet when I walked in. Not the kind of quiet that followed chaos, but the kind that came from emptiness. No one was home. No one needed to be. I walked past the kitchen, glanced at the fridge. The note I'd left was still there, corners curled. Part of me wanted to laugh. But I didn't. Down the hall, near the linen closet, I found it. Temporary belongings, guest storage. Still labeled, still mine. I picked it up, ran a thumb over the faded Sharpie letters, and said it out loud for no one to hear. I was never temporary. You just couldn't see permanent when it wasn't loud. No need to linger. I walked out, one last time. No slam, no hesitation, free. Later that afternoon, I drove to Elber's. He was already waiting on the porch, 2 mugs in hand. I figured you'd come by, he said, handing me one. We sat for a while in the kind of silence that felt earned. Back when my wife died, Elber started, I didn't say a word for 3 months. People thought I was fine, thought I didn't care. He took a slow sip. Silence ages people faster than pain. I nodded. I didn't mind being quiet, I said, until I realized that was the plan. To leave me so quiet, I'd forget I belonged. He smiled, sad and proud at the same time. I watched you care for Marcus. I never said it then, but I saw everything. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a photo, me and Marcus, from a hospital visit I'd long forgotten. You were never invisible to the right people. That was the first time in weeks I cried, not from anger, from being seen. That evening, social media found its rhythm again. A video clip, Elber's voice cutting through the party, asking about me. The pause, the awkward glances, the camera that lingered too long on silence. Then the hashtags returned. Remember the quiet ones. The host who wasn't seen. I didn't repost anything. I didn't comment. But I watched. And for the first time, the story wasn't being told for me. It was being told right. Before leaving Savannah, I dropped off an envelope at the house. No knock, no announcement. Inside, a copy of the letter Marcus wrote me, the one he hid inside that book, the one that saved me, and a note of my own. Not for forgiveness, not for guilt, just so no one says they never knew. I didn't wait for a reply. Didn't need one. Sometimes closure isn't a conversation. It's an exit. Charleston greeted me like an old friend. I found a little apartment near the water, nothing special, but it had light. I started teaching part-time at the community center. Volunteered once a week at a hospice. One night, I set the dinner table with one of the old handmade cloths, the one with my initials stitched into the corner, small, barely visible. It didn't need to be seen. I knew who made it, and that was enough. I wrote in my journal that evening, "Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what stays with you when you go." I don't wait for invitations anymore. I build my own table. The grief, it's still there. The wound isn't gone, but the voice inside me, it's no longer drowned out. I remember myself now, and sometimes that's more than justice. That's peace.